You're watching Saturday Anime on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Greetings, this is Reverend Paul, this is Studio Chojin RAW. Today we're going to be talking about Redo of Healer, but before we do that, there are a couple of other things I'd like to talk about first. Once again, I guess it's obvious to everybody that I've been away. It feels like I'm perpetually going away and coming back. I'm sorry. The problem is, I don't have things planned out. That's the problem. I figured it out. The problem before was I was making videos week to week and I kept rushing to get videos done, and then eventually other work would come up and I couldn't make a video that week, and then 1 week would turn into 2 weeks and so on and so forth. So what I realized, what I need to do is I just need to work on videos earlier. Or better yet, I could work on a video a week in advance and have it done a week prior. That would be better. The other reason I took a break is because I was working on my comic Breast Gladiators. That's right, I am still working on my ridiculously titled comic Breast Gladiators. I got a bunch of pages done and I'm hoping to release it next month. Next month I should have the Chainsaw Man video done, and the Chainsaw Man video is going to launch Studio Chojin's comic book reviews. So I figure it'd be pretty cool to tie in the launch of Studio Chojin's first comic with Studio Chojin's comic book reviews. Hopefully that stuff will all come out next month in March. I know I keep saying the Chainsaw Man video is going to come out. I'm going to try to get it out in March. I think I can. I think I could totally do it. Hopefully I could do it. But Breast Gladiators is, it's basically done. I mean, I have a decent amount of that comic done. And what I'm going to do with Breast Gladiators is I'm going to release one page every week. So what I want to do is every Saturday, I want to release a video, and Friday, I'm going to release one page of the comic. And now I realize that, releasing one page a week means that it's going to take a while for the whole issue to come out. But what you have to remember is I am one person who is drawing a comic and making videos and doing other things. And so this is the way it's got to be done. It's one page a week or no pages at all. So I mean, this to me is the best way to get the ball rolling. If I start getting ahead of myself and I can get more work done, then maybe I'll start releasing more pages a week. Maybe I'll start releasing more videos a week, but I need to build up some momentum and some stability. So first, let's just try to get videos out constantly, then try to get videos in the comics out constantly, then we can make changes from there. Another thing I wanted to say is that I think it would be cool if we could make the Studio Chojin RAW videos a little bit more interactive. I'm not live streaming, but I think it would be pretty cool if people wanted to send emails. Every week, if somebody wanted to send me an email asking me about something or suggesting a topic or something, send me an email at studiochojin@gmail.com, make the topic RAW, and I'll read it on the next episode of Studio Chojin RAW. So if you want to ask me a question, if you want to fucking take issue with something I said, if you want to make a suggestion, send me an email and I'll read it on the show. So with that said, let's talk about Redo of Healer. Now, before I get into the, review proper of Redo of Healer, I should probably mention that, there is some controversy around Redo of Healer. Redo of Healer, deals with a lot of dark subjects, violence, sexual violence, torture. There's a lot of dark stuff on there, and a lot of people have been talking about the controversy around Redo of Healer. And that's actually how Redo of Healer got on my radar. I was just scrolling through Twitter one day and, I saw all these people talking about, oh my God, this new show, Redo of Healer, it's so controversial. Can you believe the controversy around it? And that caught my attention. And I was like, okay, let me look into this. What I discovered was that, it seems like Redo of Healer is the most controversial show. And you're probably saying to yourself, well, Reverend Paul, what do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is when I looked into the controversy surrounding Redo of Healer, it seemed like the controversy about Redo of Healer was people talking about how controversial it was. That was it. There was one tweet where one of the editors at Anime News Network tweeted out, she was going to judge whoever licensed the show. And it's okay. And then a bunch of people on Twitter were like, oh my God, can you believe Anime News Network is trying to censor Redo of Healer? And it's no, they're not. One person just said they were going to judge whatever company licensed the show. It's whatever, that's her opinion. She's allowed to have an opinion. You know, I mean, it's like, whatever. I mean, she's not calling for the show to be banned or anything. At least that wasn't the impression I got. And then a couple of weeks ago, there were a bunch of websites saying American publishers refuse to publish the redo of Healer light novel. And then it's like, oh my God, that's not good. And then when I looked into it, it was actually the author of Redo of Healer approached some American publishers and asked them if they would publish the novel, and they said they weren't interested. And they said, if the show gets more popular, then, you know, we'll reconsider. But as of now, we're really not interested. Like, that's it. It's like, okay. What it feels like to me, this is what it feels like to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is the impression I get. It feels like to me that there are a bunch of people out there that are desperate for a controversy. There are a bunch of people out there who want Redo of Healer to be the subject of some outrage mob, and it really doesn't seem like anybody really gives a shit. It feels like you have these anti-SJW types, and they're going up to like the sleeping SJW bear, and they're just poking it, going, hey, what do you think about this show? There's nudity in it. There's violence in it. Are you mad? I would think you'd be mad about that. There's rape in the show. What do you think about that? Are you outraged yet? Let me know when you're outraged. Like, it does like, it does feel like there are people out there, they are just desperate to like see people pissed off about it, and nobody fucking cares, you know? Is it really surprising to anybody? Is it really surprising that like nobody is paying that much attention to this show? I mean, we are living through the pandemic era right now. People are really struggling. People are trying to pay their bills. People are trying to avoid catching a deadly disease. I mean, you know, I think most people don't really give a shit about a fucking cartoon. Like, now is not the time to be fucking outraged over a fucking cartoon show. I don't think anybody gives a shit, but I digress. So with that said, let's get into the review proper of Redo of Healer. Now, Redo of Healer is based off of a light novel, like I said, and I believe there is a manga adaptation of the story. I don't think either of them have been translated into English. Obviously, the light novel hasn't. I'm not sure if there's an English translation of the manga. There are probably some fan translations, but I don't think there's an actual official English release of the manga, although I could be wrong. Either way, I did not read the manga or the light novel. I've only watched the first 4 episodes of the show. This really isn't a review, this is more just first impressions. So, Redo of Healer takes place in a kind of like Final Fantasy JRPG kind of world. And the main character of the story is a character named Kearu. And Kearu is a healer, and he's part of like a typical JRPG party where there's a knight character, and there's like a character who wields a gun, and then other characters, you know, magic users, and he's the healer. He is responsible for healing the party when they get injured. An interesting take on his character is that he's kind of like an X-Man in the sense that like when he heals people, he absorbs their experiences and their memories, so he's able to copy their abilities. It kind of makes him like Rogue. It actually kind of ties into the plot of the show, because what the show is mainly about is what we find out is that this party of JRPG heroes, they're not your typical JRPG characters. These characters are all like psychotic and abusive, and they've all been torturing Kearu over the course of a couple of years. So when Kearu finally kills the main bad guy, the Demon King, he gets the Philosopher's Stone, and he uses that power to transport his consciousness back in time so he can get revenge on the people that abused him. And it makes him kind of like, you know, Kitty Pryde in X-Men Days of Future Past. So that is basically the meat of the story. Kearu has sent his consciousness back in time, and now he's going to get revenge on his companions who were torturing him and abusing him over the course of his life. First off, I want to say I think the concept is very original. I like that idea of doing kind of like a genre mashup in the sense that like it's a fantasy story, but the fantasy aspect of the story is not necessarily the main focus. The main focus of the story is this revenge plot. That's always a cool thing to do, you know, when you taking a revenge story and then putting it in different contexts. You know, there's no reason why a revenge story has to take place in modern times. It could take place in a Western, it could take place in a fantasy world, it can take place in space. I mean, I like that idea of kind of mixing up genres in that regard and doing a sort of revenge story in the context of a fantasy setting. Another thing to mention is that the show is very dark. It's certainly a transgressive show. This show goes way beyond anything Goblin Slayer really did. I watched the uncensored version, and the uncensored version of the show is basically a hentai that just doesn't show you any of the details. The show to me feels like the birth of a supervillain. I saw a lot of people online debating whether the character Kearu, whether he's the hero of the story, whether he's a good guy, whether he's a bad guy. And in my opinion, he is very clearly a bad guy. He is not a good dude. And I think it is kind of weird that you see people like trying to defend him as like a good person, because it's one thing to defend the character's actions in regards to the story. It's another thing to like say he's morally right for the things that he does. I mean, I think that's a bridge too far. I mean, that's a little weird to me. We are watching some psychotic supervillain become who he's going to be. I don't think the show is ambiguous in regards to whether Kearu is a good guy or a bad guy. I think there are a couple of tells. Now, admittedly, again, I've only watched the first 4 episodes, so we'll see how this goes. But the way the first 4 episodes are structured, the most intense episode is episode 2, where we see Kearu get his revenge on Flare. She's kind of like the knight character in the JRPG party. Kearu, he goes to live like in Flare's castle, and then he's then tortured and raped and abused by Flare and her soldiers and whatever. And then finally he gets his revenge on her. And then that scene of him torturing her is very drawn out. And to me, that is the tell. That is the psychological tell that Kearu is not a good dude. What's important to point out is that when we start to see the transgressions against Kearu, all that stuff is told in a montage. But then when Kearu gets his revenge on Flare, that is drawn out. And you see every fucking detail of that scene. And he comes off like a psychopath. It's one thing like in The Crow for a character to come back and, I'm going to shoot this guy and I'm going to blow up this guy, and I'm going to stab this guy. It's one thing for a character to toy with his enemies and then kill them. It's another thing for a character to like sadistically take pleasure in drawing out somebody's torture, like psychologically and physically. And it's like, okay, now you have crossed the line. You are now just as bad as these people who you claim to hate. You have crossed the line into being an awful person yourself. So I think that's, the first big tell that Kearu is not a good guy. And then if that isn't enough, what we find out after the torture sequence with Flare, Kearu has wiped her memory and he's basically turned her into this submissive, cutesy anime girl. And when that scene happens and, he reveals to her like, oh, you've lost your memory and, you're my slave and whatever, the score goes into this like horror movie sting, like dun. And it's like, okay, yeah, this is like the show is telling you what he's doing is fucked up. So it seems very clear to me that this guy is not supposed to be someone to be cheering for. I don't even know if I can call him an anti-hero. I think he's just a bad guy. Again, we'll see how the story develops. One thing I thought was really interesting was the fact that he's a healer character. And it's one of those things that pisses me off that I didn't think of it, because that's a really great subversion of this kind of story. Because typically in like RPGs, the healer character, he's kind of a defensive character. He's not there at the forefront. You're not going to use the healer to kill the bad guy. The healer's there just to be kind of passive and to fucking deal out elixirs to your team. And taking the healer character and making him the villain, where he's using his healing abilities to torture people, he'll torture somebody and then heal them so he can torture them some more. I mean, that's fucked up, but like creatively, it's like, oh my God, that's an amazing way to reinvent this character into like a villain. And it actually reminds me of, I think there's a Guro comic called, I think it's My Chan's Daily Life. It's a story about a girl. She's like a maid and she has like regeneration powers like Wolverine. And she's basically like tortured through the whole comic. And she just regenerates, and they do all these horrible things to her. They cut off her limbs and do all this stuff to her. And then she just regenerates and she does it again. And it's a sick, twisted comic. But I remember the first time I read it, I was just kind of taken aback because like it's basically this kind of twisted version of Wolverine. And I remember thinking like, wow, I never would have thought of that. Who would have ever thought that like Wolverine would be like a dream come true for a sadistic person, like a person who you could torture over and over again and they'll keep regenerating. And it's like, and I don't know, I thought it was a really interesting way to use that character. And I feel like the same thing is going on here with Redo of Healer, where we have this healer character and we're taking something that was very banal and we are turning it into this like twisted character. It was interesting. I thought that was a really interesting thing. What I am concerned with right now, as far as the story goes, because once again, I've only watched the first 4 episodes, I'm afraid that there's not going to be any substance to any of this. I thought the concept was really interesting, and I like once again, the kind of subversion of the healer character, reinventing this banal character into a twisted villain. I think all of that is interesting, but so far, 4 episodes in, I don't know that there's a lot of there. I don't know that there's a lot of substance to it. We'll find out. Because initially what I was thinking was that this could be an unreliable narrator situation, because the story is told in first person. So what I was thinking was that okay, maybe what's going to happen down the line is that we're going to find out that Kearu is just a twisted psycho, and the things that he's telling us that he's experienced didn't actually happen. These are just things he's telling us to justify the horrible things that he's doing. And I was thinking to myself, okay, that would be cool. That would be a pretty cool reveal. And I was waiting for little hints to that, and there really hasn't been any. So I'm wondering if, and then when you look at some of the artwork, there's that one promo pic with Kearu and Flare and then Setsuna and the other girl. It actually kind of looks almost like a fantasy harem anime when you look at that promo pic. So I'm wondering is there going to be any substance to this, or is this just going to be some kind of twisted harem anime where this guy is just building up this team of women so he could, torture them and have his way with them? That's what seems like is happening now, 4 episodes in. He's building his team, and it's just okay, I'm going to torture these chicks, I'm going to have my way with them, and I'm going to get my revenge. But it's is that all the story is going to be about, or is there going to be more substance? I'm reminded of something Mark Kermode said. And Mark Kermode, the film critic, he said basically, there's good torture porn and there's bad torture porn, which is, that sounds ridiculous when you say it, but he elaborated by saying, you take a movie like Hostel, and you take a movie like Martyrs. They are both torture porn movies, but Martyrs is a torture porn movie that is about something. The violence in Martyrs is in service of a greater idea. There's a story there. Hostel, on the other hand, is just a bunch of fucked up shit. It's just okay, wouldn't it be fucked up if this happened? Wouldn't it be fucked up if this happened? There is no method to the mayhem. It's just violence for the sake of violence. Whereas Martyrs, not to spoil Martyrs, but Martyrs takes the idea of suffering and how religions deify this notion of suffering. In Christianity, the greatest thing you can do is suffer because that makes you more like Jesus, because Jesus suffered. And the film Martyrs is commenting on that idea. And that's what makes Martyrs an interesting film. And it's not just about violence for the sake of violence. So the point I'm trying to make here is that I'm wondering if Redo of Healer is using, is the violence and the torture in this story ultimately going to serve a purpose? Are we going to be commenting on revenge or commenting on the cycle of abuse? Is the show going to touch upon these things, or is it just going to be fucked up shit for the sake of fucked up shit? That's what I'm wondering. And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with fucked up shit for the sake of fucked up shit. The problem with that is that sometimes it can be kind of boring. If all you have is a series of torture sequences, it can be kind of disconnecting, and it's all right, whatever. I get the idea. This is kind of getting monotonous. Unless you're going to do a Saw or Friday the 13th kind of thing, where it is just a series of violent scenes, but each scene is more over the top and more ridiculous. So the reason you're watching is because you want to see them top each scene as they go along. So I don't know if we're going to do that. Is that where the show's going to go? Is it just going to be a montage of these torture sequences that are going to get more and more ridiculous? Or is it going to be a story that, once again, has a message to it and an idea behind it? And it'll be making a meaningful commentary on the darkness it's presenting. There was one opportunity that kind of felt like a missed opportunity. I think it was in the 4th episode, where we have the character Setsuna, who's she's part of the wolf tribe, and Kearu recruits her because she hates humans as much as he does. And they get to this point where the water supply has been poisoned and it's been harming the people in the village. And Kearu asks Setsuna, what should I do? Should I clean the water supply or should I keep it poisoned? And then Setsuna says, I want you to clean the water supply, take the poison out of the water. And then it's like, okay, that's interesting. Like, so like she's not being corrupted by her revenge. But then she goes, but then we find out later, she's like, no, the reason I wanted you to get the poison out of the water is because I want to kill these motherfuckers with my bare hands. And then it's like, okay, so Kearu actually says, she's been corrupted. And it's like, okay, like if we had a juxtaposition between these two characters where one person is going down this darker side and another character is struggling with it, that's an interesting dynamic. I don't know. It's hard to do this video because it's almost like I watched the first 20 minutes of a movie and I'm just like spitballing about where I think it's going to go. So it's hard to like sit there and say, well, this is, because so much of this is set up. So it's really hard to like make any judgments about it. I mean, I guess this is going to sound really fucked up, but I mean, one thing I was kind of surprised by was because I watched the uncensored version, and the uncensored version, as I mentioned earlier, is basically a hentai without any of the detail. They're basically having these drawn out sex sequences, but they're just cropping it so you don't see any details. And I couldn't help but wonder, like, why? Like, you might as well just show everything. Like, if we're going to make this like super edgy, offensive show, just fucking go all the way and just show everything in like brutal detail, and let's all be like fucking, let's all be like blown away by how like fucking transgressive this show is. I guess that they couldn't do that because it's a show that is airing on TV in Japan, so I guess they have to put some kind of limitations. That to me does feel like a little bit of a cop-out because it's trying to be this transgressive and dangerous show, but we're gonna crop out, genitals and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, like how dangerous can you possibly be? Another thing I'm hoping that they do is that they expand upon the other characters. Right now it feels like all the other characters, the character Flare, and then, the other characters in the party who were torturing Kearu, right now it just feels like they're all cartoonishly evil. Why are they doing these things to him? And I always find that kind of disconnecting. Like I think about something like Ichi the Killer, or even a lot of Eroguro stories. And this, I mean, in some ways, Reju of Healer feels kind of like an Eroguro story. But there's this quality these stories have where everybody is psychotic and everybody is cartoonishly evil, and it is completely disconnecting. It's hard to get invested in the story because everybody is just psychotic, for no reason. And it just makes them come off as like one-dimensional. And like, look, the world is a twisted place and fucked up shit happens. But I mean, like, even crazy people have dimension to their character. I mean, nobody is just psychotic for the sake of being psychotic. And so like, I'm hoping we'll see some development in these characters and we'll get to understand what is going on and why these characters are so evil. Because like I said, like when you're existing in that world and everybody is just evil for no reason and they're just doing the most horrible things to people for no fucking reason, it becomes so disconnecting. And like, again, it becomes sort of violence for the sake of violence, which once again, I'm not going to say that's necessarily bad, but it's not always interesting. It's just, it can get pretty boring where it's like, look at the fucked up shit this person is doing and look at the fucked up shit this person is doing. And it's like, yeah, look, we get it. Everybody's fucked up and they're doing evil shit. I'm hoping there's going to be some substance to this going forward. I don't know. That's what I think so far about the first 4 episodes of Redo of Healer. When the next 4 come out, I guess we'll do an update and we'll see where it goes from there. And then we'll do the next 4 after that. So that's all I got to say. Thank you for checking out the video. If you want to support the channel, you could always hit the like button, you could subscribe, tell a friend, join the unholy army of the night, become a regular viewer of Studio Chojin. I also have a Ko-fi account if you want to donate anything you can to help Studio Chojin stay afloat. That's all I got to say this week, and I will be back next week with more ramblings. So, this is Reverend Paul saying, until we meet again.